Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome and welcome back. We're here to introduce you to the sky, the stars, the planets, much as if we were sitting around a campfire looking up, or as originally planned in a small group at the Queen Elizabeth Planetarium. Do a little bit of talking and then step outside to point at the real sky, so to do something practical. Tonight would have been really good for that. But until then, we're having to do this by Zoom. So first and foremost, these sessions are all about looking what you can see with your eyes. No telescope is required, but binoculars are great if you have them. And they're also quite useful for looking at some of the objects we do talk about to give them a bit more detail. We will not be covering black holes, dark matter, dark energy, or any of the Brian Cox adventures in astronomy talk about, because, well, we've got great speakers that come and talk about those very topics at our monthly meetings. So one of the things you'll hear me say again and again is it's really crucial for you to make a point to step outside every clear evening, even for 5 minutes, to reinforce the names of the brightest stars and the names of the constellations and identify the major planets. Berta and I have designed these sessions so that you can enter the loop at any time without being overwhelmed or having to catch up. And so concepts generally repeat on an annual basis. And we hope to get you to download the Explore the Universe PDF from the RASC.ca, our national parent body. And if you follow along and go outside and check off boxes, you'll be able to earn the Explore the Universe certificate and pin that come free. So please go to the main webpage that announces this meeting and download it, print it out, and follow along. The RASC is our parent organization, nonprofit group of about 5,000 amateur astronomers, a handful of professionals dedicated to the advancement of astronomy and allied sciences. Our Edmonton Center here has 300 plus members, and as you'll likely know, we hold monthly Zoom meetings with guest speakers, and we have quite the active astro imaging group as well, and an email chat list and Facebook page. So by all means, please join in on that. And if you can't get enough astronomy fast enough, please check out the links to the to additional introductory sessions that were created and recorded by our national office. So with that, we'll switch over to main one. And welcome to autumn, my favorite time of the year. The sky gets dark enough, soon enough, temperature isn't too brutal yet, and lots of clear skies, usually. A bit too cloudy recently, though. But sometimes it's all in time. Okay, so what we're covering today are the usual satellites, what's up in the autumn sky, a couple of things about the moon, some deep sky objects called the Coathanger and the Andromeda Galaxy, a couple of double stars, and a little bit about the upcoming Mercury apparition in the second half of October. It's going to be a great one. And it's at an actual reasonable time in the morning, 7 o'clock. And that's even on daylight time. So starting off with the International Space Station, it's going through some very nice evening passes right now. It's one of the brightest things in the sky. It moves about the same speed as a high-flying aircraft, but it has a very, typically when it's close and high, it's a very bright light. It's probably the brightest thing up there other than the moon and the sun. And so just for the next few passes, like 22nd, like tonight, at 19 past 10 o'clock at night. It'll start low in the west, and by just almost at 21 minutes past the hour, it will be in the west-southwest, 26 degrees up. So you'll just see this nice, slow-moving, super bright light. And so as you can see, the passes are, many of them are at a very reasonable time. The ones to look for are when the highest point is a big number, like 64. So that means 2/3 of the way up the sky. So it's a very high pass, and it's at its brightest because it's physically actually closer to us. So we get quite a number of these passes. Log into heavensabove.com, punch in Edmonton. I have my own login, so it remembers my coordinates, and just click on ISS passes, and these all come out. For those of you who are aware that the Chinese are putting up their own space station, Tiangong, may wonder, oh, we should be able to see that too. Well, as it turns out, when I punched it in, it's like no passes this week, not next week, not next week, not next month. So then when I did this, plotted its orbit that comes along with Heavens Above, you just click on a link and it shows you the ground track. And you'll see that the maximum north it goes is just south of the Prairie Canadian border. So what ends up happening is that it's too low in our sky. You might be able to see it from Calgary, low down in the sky, but not from Edmonton. So we will never see it from here. So basically the idea of why they chose that height of orbit is, well, if you slide this over, it comes right over mainland China. Okay, so what a night sky and the autumn sky for the next month or so. As the twilight deepens down, we still have the summer triangle high in the south. So if you print out the chart that came along with the announcement of the meeting, and you put the S at the bottom for south, the middle is straight overhead, the middle of the chart, and the bright star up there is Deneb, so the summer triangle, Deneb, Vega, and Altair. And so those are probably 80% of the star names that you ever really need to know. Not quite, maybe 50% of them. Those are the really common ones. Like I could not tell you the name of this star below it, other than its Delta Cygni. Anyways, so tonight's targets are going to be the Coathanger, which is just nestled on one of the lines connecting the summer triangle, and then straight down, almost perfectly pointing right down to it, will be Alpha Capricornus, a nice double star, and just next to it, Saturn and Jupiter. So lots of really good stuff to look at. Page down. There we go. So what I did here was I just rotated the chart 90 degrees to put east down at the bottom. And so now I'm facing east. Overhead is still Deneb high up, but in front of us, halfway up the sky almost, is the Great Square of Pegasus, Andromeda, and the Andromeda Galaxy. Not too far over is the W of Cassiopeia. And so those will be our main topics of conversation for this evening. So some of you are aware that something like the Summer Triangle is not actually a constellation. Even the Big Dipper is not a constellation. It's just a group of stars that has the label asterism. And so this is actually introduced to me by our longtime member and friend Bruce McCurdy, and it's the Great Dipper. And if you can't quite see it in these stars here, I'll press next. And it's actually made up of 3 constellations, the Great Square of Pegasus being the bowl of the Great Dipper, the main handle being the stars of Andromeda, and the very end of the handle of the Great Dipper is the variable star Algol. And this is actually one of the things that's very useful because when you look at Perseus, which is this nice long constellation here, there's a lot of stars of semi-similar brightness. And so with this asterism and shape of the Great Dipper, it's really obvious that, oh, this one is Algol, not that one, not this one over here, not that one over there. It's like, boom, it looks like the Big Dipper, and the tail is Algol. So it's like, that's really useful. But the other thing that will be useful here is this gently curving arc of 3 equally bright stars and perfectly spaced. I'll just go back up to the previous one. And realize that in the city, you'll probably see just fewer stars than this. And so these 3 equally bright space stars are what we'll be looking for to get to the Andromeda Galaxy. And so I always think of it as a bow, like a bow and arrow. The string, of course, would be connecting these 2. And if you pulled the string back, you'd be going past this other star. And just at the right point where you basically have your hand to let go, that's where the Andromeda Galaxy is. And it's just this perfect spacing from the middle one to the top and to its spot right here, the little star just off to the side. Quite a few people prefer to get to the Andromeda Galaxy by following the V on the right-hand side of the W. But I find, well, if you come down here, you might miss it. But if you're hovering around in binoculars, especially if you're outside of the city, you'll have no trouble finding it, even if you're off course. But I prefer this beautiful, symmetrical, easy to remember pattern. Well, easy for me. Other people might not have such an easy time to it. But the other thing to remember is that this star is actually shared by Pegasus and Andromeda. And so you have to remember that even though it's Andromeda, well, it's also Pegasus. Moving on to the moon, Berta offers her regrets at not being able to join us. She's got a parent-teacher meeting to go to at a school where I'm sure the discussion there is going to be much more heated than whatever we can come up with tonight here. Anyways, so as we're looking at the moon, and the moon is just past full at the moment, so it's mostly this. So one of the eye sockets to the man in the moon face is the Sea of Serenity. And it's one of the larger basins. And by basin, it was generated by a large asteroid impacting into the very young moon. So this is more than 3 billion years ago. So it's just about everything that happened on the moon happened really early, and then things quietened down for a fair bit. It excavated a huge basin, literally a bowl. And then later, as the tectonic and lava flows from underneath came up through cracks in the floor and flooded the inside of the bowl. And that's why it's, well, mostly round, similar to this one. This is Mare Imbrium here. But our focus tonight is Serenity. And yeah, so we have a couple of lunar missions that have landed in this area. And just to the north, this is, again, the Sea of Serenity here. So 6 days past a new moon will highlight these craters. But These craters will get reverse lighting in just a few nights as the light will be flooding from the left instead of this one on the right. And these two marvelous craters that are noticeable in binoculars. So here's where it'd be useful if you have a couple of binoculars. You're not going to be able to see these two with the unaided eye. As Bert had noted, there's deep terrace walls for both of these. And there's a close-up here. Aristoteles has a nice, almost perfectly round shape, but the center, it's just, imagine if you were at the beach and you dug a hole and the walls just caved in. You'd get a lot of this. And then it looks like there's some lava that had come up from underneath to cover the central peaks, because there would be central peaks here and they're just jutting out, but the lava from underneath has welled up and almost covered those. So lots of detail to be seen at high power in a telescope. Okay, shifting over to deep sky objects. Once again, I'll just refer to the summer triangle, Deneb, Vega, and Altair. And Vega has got the constellation Lyra, which we'll be looking at in just a moment. But a little more than halfway down towards Aquila is where we'll find the Coathanger. Sagitta is this tiny little constellation here. Sagitta is an arrow. And so the arrow by Greek mythology was shot but missed the bird eagle Aquila. Now, as Bertha noted here, the Coathanger is not actually a true cluster. For the longest time it was, and you'll see why when you look in binoculars. So this would be a bit bigger than a binocular field on the left here. The top star here is Alberio from Cygnus, and here's Sagitta. So it's just this, come down here and pop off to the upper right, and you'll see this little upside down Coathanger. So in a very wide field telescope, it's actually the right way up. And so this is one of the fantastic deep sky objects that actually looks like what its name is. Nothing like the running chicken nebula. But beautiful colors here. So again, in any small scope, the binoculars will just start to pick out some of the different shades of blue and the topaz yellow. As we just said, we've since found out that these stars are unrelated. They just happen to be in the line of sight, and we found out thanks to the two big space missions that are called, the original one, Hipparcos, that measured the distances to stars, and the new current one called Gaia. And Gaia's got phenomenal precision, and so it was able to confirm that, yeah, actually these stars are not close to each other physically. One is, or several are in the distance in behind. So it's a pity that it's not a true cluster, but nonetheless, it's a beautiful binocular object and something to help you earn your deep sky part of your Explore the Universe certificate. Jumping over to Andromeda and the big Andromeda Galaxy. It's the closest major galaxy, so something on the order of 500 billion stars, give or take. So that's an awful lot. And it's only about just a little over 100 years ago now that there was a huge debate between two top-end astronomers as to whether the galaxy was locally just a nebula, a cloud of gas inside our own galaxy, or whether this was a whole other galaxy external to our own. Back 100 years ago, the entire universe was just our galaxy. And a few people started thinking, I don't know, the numbers and the evidence is starting to add up that these elliptical nebula are actually home to billions and billions of stars. So here's part of the Great Square of Pegasus, and the arc and Algol will be just off to the left, off the edge of the chart. But here's that nice gentle arc, the little star, and twice the distance, bam, you're right on it. So that you should be able to pick out now and then, even from the city, in binoculars, but it's tiny. It's the extent that's shown here on the chart is what it would look like from the country, but from the city we just get to see the very brightest part of the inner core. And so it would just look like a star that's slightly fuzzy. Next, on the Explore the Universe certificate is double stars. Now, double stars come in two basic flavors: true binaries that actually orbit each other, and other doubles that are just what we call optical. They're in the line of sight. And it turns out that this one Delta is an optical double. And it's got as well a nice orange and blue pair. It's actually a little bit easier to see than Alberio, which is the more famous double that's up there. In binoculars, that is. And here is a picture of Lyra. It covers the double, which is up at the top here. You can actually see the two brighter components split. You'd need a telescope to see the other. Each one of these two stars is a double itself. But the one that we're talking about, Delta Lyrae, is right in here. And even in binoculars, you can tell that there's a sparkle of stars, smattering of bright stars. And this is actually an open cluster that has been shown to be an actual grouping, but it's pretty sparse, just something on the order of a couple of dozen members, of which the brightest two or three form this double. The other very easy double star that we're looking at is down in Capricornus, down close to the horizon. So Jupiter is just off on this side, and Saturn is somewhere in here. I'll have it on the next picture. But up in the upper right corner is where this double is. When I was sort of semi-serious about there's only a handful of names that you really need to know. Today, working up for this presentation, this is the first time I actually knew or found out what the name of that particular star is. I have no idea. So don't worry about memorizing the names of thousands of stars. You only need a couple of dozen to really get your way around the sky. Capricornus is a very delicate constellation. From the city, you only really see these two stars on the right and this one star on the left, and that's it. From the country, you can see the sort of little sparkling of stars that form this sort of necklace type figure. And that's how I remember it. It's just a nice little necklace hanging over the southern horizon in the late summer to early autumn. So coming up is a picture. Scrolling down. And so there's brilliant Jupiter on the left, nice peachy yellow Saturn in the middle. And so here's the necklace. The fainter stars in the background tend to hide it. So under a really dark sky, it's actually pretty easy to lose this constellation because you can end up seeing all these extra stars in there, but it's just this loose necklace. So at the upper right, you can just see it split there and zoomed in a little bit with binoculars, and you'll be able to very easily see these things split into a nice, easy pair. So that works wonders for the Explore the Universe certificate. It's literally takes less than 5 minutes to chalk that one off. And now, for my favorite event coming up this October will be the Mercury Apparition. And it's going to be a morning event. And so here's a diagram that lifted off of the NASA JPL webpage that shows orbits of comets and asteroids and all that. And I just chose not to show any asteroids on here, but just zoom into the inner solar system. And you can see we're looking down at a slant. So imagine if you're looking down at a flat table at that kind of angle. So Earth is in front of us, and straight up from it is the sun. Mercury is off to the side. And so as you can see, as Mercury goes around in its orbit, from Earth's perspective, this angle from Sun, Earth, Mercury can't get any bigger than this. This is as far from the sun as it's ever going to get for this particular apparition. Some apparitions, when it's on that side, you'll notice that it'll get farther from the sun at other times. But for this time, and this diagram is for mid-October, that's as far out as Mercury gets. So Mercury is always found only in the evening or morning sky, and this is a morning one. And what you'll see in the sky is something to give you a reference. If you've seen Venus before, this is Venus down here. And then the next brightest thing, when Mercury hits its greatest elongation, plus or minus a few days, Mercury is pretty bright. It's actually brighter than Saturn. The difference, though, is that Saturn is in a dark sky, whereas Mercury's always got a little bit of twilighty sky in here. But it certainly classifies when it's at its brightest as, there's this plane a long distance away from us that's coming in for landing. That's how bright Mercury can be. But the trick in Mercury, it's all about timing and getting it when it's at its peak and at its brightest. So a couple of years ago, I had an evening apparition of Mercury, and we just had this ridiculously lucky streak of good weather, and I was able to go out several days in a row, a couple of times the distance one. There's one just on this stitch of cloud here, another one here, and there's actually another one that's buried down in the brighter glow. But so you can see most of this in binoculars, and then if you don't have binoculars, you can see it during this 10-day window at the top of the arc. And I've on the website, I've got a table of dates and times when to go look at the sky. And I choose very particularly when the sun is almost 9 degrees below the horizon, about an hour after it has set, or in the morning case, it'll be about an hour before it rises. And this is when I find that Mercury has sort of the best contrast with being able to pop out of the dark blue sky. So it's not too low, or the sky is not too bright. So it's the Goldilocks thing. And at the start of the 10-day window on October 21st, it's 7:15 a.m. And at the end of the 10-day window, it's 7:45. when Mercury, when it's at this perfect time of twilight. And so just a little bit of explanation as to why sometimes Mercury can be easy to see and sometimes it can be very difficult, even when it's at its greatest elongation. So the current one that we're having in the morning, so the blue line here is the horizon. This symbol down here is the sun. And Mercury is this icon up here. So nice high above the horizon. But, so this is for October, November mornings. This is how the elongation Mercury always works. When we're on the other side of the sun and the tilt of the Earth is not favorable to the angle of the path of the planets, the ecliptic, it's much shallower. And so here in March, here's this greatest elongation. And if you actually sort of scoot your eyes back and forth, left and right, this distance between the sun and Mercury is actually bigger on the left than it is on the right. But because the horizon right here is here and it's on such a slant, when the sun is 9 degrees below the horizon, Mercury is already set, or it hasn't even risen yet. And so that's why sometimes you might get a bit in one of the news feeds, oh, Mercury is at its greatest elongation. Oh, that's fine if you live in Phoenix or Miami, but not at this latitude. We get this problem where some of these elongations like this, and also the summer ones in July, there's the sun here, Mercury here. And it's just, no, it's not even worth trying to go out and see it. But hey, from October 21st to 31st, just walk outside, look to the east at the time that I've given you, between 7:15, especially on the 21st, and you just look, as long as you don't have too many trees, boom, it'll be nice and easy. So I've just brought this picture back up to give you an idea. And this is, its motion in the sky is from day to day to day to day. And it's something you don't really notice unless you've got a good sort of frame of reference, some trees or buildings that don't move compared to when Mercury shows up nicely. So with that is going to be the end of the Explore the Universe for September into October. If you've got any questions, by all means, please unmute yourself and ask away, and I'll stop sharing this. And next week, our wonderful Jeff Robertson will be sharing what's up in the sky. So he'll be covering a little bit of this, some different things as well. But that's it for Mercury. Mercury is one of those surprising things. It's once you know when and where to look for it, it's really easy. Oh, I think you're still muted, Al. Or your mic is dead. No luck, Al. Okay. Yeah. So
The marvels of technology. Thank you again. This was very informative.
oh, no, you're welcome. Did I hear you, Al?
Oh, no.
Ah, there you go.
Okay, now I can't hear you. Okay, all right. I think maybe this works.
Okay.
Regarding the Mercury photo, usually my understanding is that you snap a series of pictures from day to day to day, and then you superimpose them on one background.
That's right.
How do you basically Photoshop the terrain away from the ones that you don't want to show up for? Just sort of, and then superimpose them in layers?
No, it is layers, but it's actually, well, it's not super easy, but it's pretty easy. The big thing is just making sure, especially if you have a zoom lens, is to crank it, well, all the way to one end or the other, something like 50 or 70 millimeters, so to make sure that that doesn't change, because when you start changing the zoom, that makes the layering just, you have to add in a couple more steps. Yeah. But if you just have a single lens, like a 40 or 50 millimeter lens, and you go back to the same spot, try and set up your tripod the same way, try and angle your camera the same way, and then shoot. And I always do 3 exposures, and I trust what the camera's the histogram. It shows how bright the image is, and I just take 3 pictures and then choose the best one out of them. But it'll always end up being consistent because I'm taking it at the same twilight time, not the same clock time, but how much the sun is down is the same twilight time in that table I've got. And so it's the same exposure, and all you need to do then is pull it into Photoshop or GIMP, and you might have to just sort of adjust the rotation slightly. And then you choose under the layers the function called lighten. And so when you do lighten, what it does with all the stacks, it just picks whichever thing is brightest. And so the sky is almost the same, not quite, but Mercury will be the brightest thing in that part of the sky. And then when you bring in another layer, again, use lighten, and it'll pick up Mercury again, and it just dip, 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 dip. But the big thing is trying to keep your camera as close to not moving as much as possible. I also use a software called Huggin, which does panoramas, and you can actually just dump all of your pictures into the interface and hit. You have to go through a few things, but you can have it remapped so it spits out the pictures so that you can overlay them perfectly. And so I use that quite a lot. And so to me, that's a minimal amount of mucking about. There is some mucking about, but it's not too bad.
For the example you showed there, the lens, are you utilizing like the lens itself? Like obviously there's a whole breadth and scope of different lenses, but this was a direct camera shot off tripod, not utilizing a telescope or anything like that. It was just basically like using an SLR, or was it a raw? Do you take the photographs in raw format?
I do now. Before, back in my earlier days, I just used to use JPEG. JPEG is actually okay. There's typically they work fairly well, but
it's just the compression ratios and can sometimes get a little. By the way, first I bought myself my first telescope, and I haven't even set it up yet. It's just something I've been interested. I've been a member for a year now, and I'm finally getting off my duff. So this is my first attending one of these. So my background is my professional background is cameras, integrated payloads that go on helicopters, but they're pointing to the ground, so it's not away, I'm near. So that's why I'm asking like the different types of formats and format, like, you know, utilizing there's certain benefits and gives and takes on it, but with the photography you're taking right now, you're using like a COTS SLR.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Just yeah, right. And standard lens, nothing particularly fancy. Kit lenses. Well,
Yeah.
a couple of them I've now got better than kit lenses.
I won't raid my wear shop. The one camera that we have on one of our gimbals is an 800mm lens.
Yeah. So most of I mean, your question is, you know, do you need a telescope for this sort of thing? And Mercury itself is a small planet. It's far away, and you're looking low through the atmosphere. It's basically you're not seeing any detail except for seeing its shape. And that's one of the other neat things about Mercury, is that over a span of 2 weeks, you can actually see it go from a sort of not quite full to a nice thin crescent. You just won't see any terrain on it.
I'm looking forward to starting and playing around with this sort of stuff. So I'm north of St. Albert, so I do have a fair amount of dark sky up here.
Mm-hmm. Especially with Mercury being one of the brighter ones, it's a great city object as well. I've seen it several times, just you know, on the drive eastward, and it's like, oh, there it is, and then it's like, oh, he's back on the road before something happens. If the moon was there to help it along, but for that type of sort of panorama shot, which I featured there, it's all wide angle, so 40mm lens. Well, not super wide, but and with the 40, I found I actually had to, as Mercury moved across, because it shifts about 15-20 degrees, so it was to keep it sort of more or less centered. It was nice to just sort of angle the camera a little bit by little bit. It turns out really nicely. And the great thing about DSLRs, again, is just like, you know, I recommended 3 images at slightly different exposures. And it's like, take 8 and choose the one. You know, you're only wasting electrons, so it really makes it easy for it that way.
Is it worthwhile pursuing something like it? Sorry, I apologize for dominating with all these questions. I apologize. When you have the tripod, is there any benefit to looking at some of these new gyro stabilized mounts? Or is it just a static mount is sufficient? Like you're utilizing a static mount doing the photography, just don't hit the tripod.
Yeah. Try not to kick it, which we all do, and especially at something like 40 or 70mm focal length, you can actually sort of get away with sort of using your hand to trigger the button. Although I would always recommend a remote, and these days especially with Wi-Fi, trigger the camera without actually touching the thing. Is the best thing. I mean, so you know, anything for extra stabilizers, that's great. But for because it's so wide angle, it's quite easy on your shooting. You don't need to worry too much about the finesse of things. One thing that I do for myself is learned how to use the wait 5 seconds before taking the picture, so you can actually go push down the shutter, hands off, and then in 5 seconds. And
it's
so that way
the group photo, the group photos, the timer, so to speak. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and that would give enough time for it to stabilize. Yeah, that would make good sense. Okay. Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate the insight.
Yeah. So I've done these things before sometimes, and the trying to do it with the phone. Well, phones are getting better and better and better every year. But if that's the only thing you've got is a phone, give it a try. Try zooming in, but yeah, make sure you do have that time delay because your hands are just far too shaky. And the other thing that's an advantage here compared to, say, if you're trying to shoot the moon, that's where you'd want the image stabilizer stuff. It's I remember diagnosing one of Bruce's problems. He was shooting crescent moon and Mercury, and they got blurred. And I eventually figured out, even though he was using one of those cable releases, it was enough shaking via the wire, and his tripod was so flimsy that his whole camera was just shaking as he held the timer. So sometimes that's as you go up beyond 200 millimeters, then more and more stability is required.
Oh, fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
By the way, great sunset shots tonight. I was a little bit running late because I was blown away by the sky on the horizon. It looked like it was a flame.
I missed it.
Not the stars, but it was still cool.
Yep, I have many a nice wallpaper of pink and orange clouds. So welcome to the group, and by all means, find your way onto the Facebook page and the Astro email list if that's your thing too.
I've been enjoying that. I've just started following that up. My goal is to find the time. I bought myself a Celestron 8-inch next star, so I just need to find the time, a bottle of wine, and the wherewithal to figure out how to configure this sucker. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a fun fall.
Is it the single 4-carbon one? Is that the SE?
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I did some research for it. It seemed to be for somebody who, I think it'll be something that I'll be able to get a fair amount of flexibility and use out of it. So
yeah,
just as long as I don't break it.
Yeah, the good news with those particular scopes is as long as it's functioning properly, the first time you set it up, it might be 20 minutes, and then from then on in, it's like 3 or 4 minutes to set up and run. They're wonderful things because it'll also remember your location when you go and do it the second time. So yeah, they're super fast to set up and great optics for looking at Jupiter, Saturn.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to trying it out, especially as I said, I'm north of St. Albert, so I have a lot of sky. So first thing is try to figure out configure it, and then try to develop a pallet mount on the back of my pickup truck so I can just drive it somewhere and then just pull over on the side of the road and play around with it there.
But yeah, by all means, I mean, if you have any issues with it, just post a note on the list, and someone will be bound to help you. But I set up a few of those before, and they're generally you just follow the instructions, and yeah, hey, it works.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, and I will have questions, so thank you, and I will ask them.
That comment about being at the side of the road reminds me, I think there was either an email list or discussion some months ago about, I think maybe Michael Noble with all his NLC star or cloud chasing, about the sort of etiquette of pulling off to the side of the road and what you're allowed to, where you're allowed to park on the side of the road. And I wasn't aware that there was, anything. I would have just randomly parked, not in the middle, of course, but on the shoulder. But I gather that there is some kind of protocol for where you're allowed to pull over and where you're not. Is that correct, Alister?
Mm-hmm. I just heard thunder.
Yes, we have a good lightning show out the back here, or out the front.
And the back.
And the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, Bruce just dropped off the SQ meter for me, and we stood out in the rain for a little bit and watched the lightning. Oh, he also said thanks for mentioning giving him credit for the Great Dipper. Because I mentioned that you mentioned it tonight.
No, thank you. Yeah, so back to your question now about the road, they're called allowances. And it's very similar to your own private property. You actually don't own the front 3 feet next to the street. It's up to you to maintain it, of course, but you find out it's actually not yours. And so the same thing happens with all the agricultural fields next to the range roads or township roads, is that there's a space on either side of the road that is technically not private property. It's crown land. If there's a line of telephone poles, those ones actually provide the edge of the field. Or if there's an actual fence, that'll be the property line. But so on the very little used range roads or township roads, wherever you see where a combine would go into the field, because otherwise there's the road and then there's these gullies often filled with water, and then you get the fields on the other side. But where the combines pull into the field, there's a solid piece, and that's sort of where you're allowed to park. That's actually crown land. Of course, the last thing you want to do is to do that at harvest time. So you've got to be a little, well, just aware that you're in the way if you're going to do something like that. But the other places that Mike he's got a smattering of gravel pit sites. And those are usually a bit farther off the main road. And those pits usually have a driveway of sorts. And quite often, because of course big trucks go there, those driveways are about 3 car lengths long. And so you just pull in and drop your equipment there. And of course, you hope that there's going to be no truck coming to pick anything up, but usually that's daylight operations. So it's pretty safe. And the nice thing about gravel pits as well is that typically they're on roads that are infrequently used, so there's just less headlight traffic.
Great to know. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah. Okay, so unless there's any more questions, thanks for dropping in, and best wishes for looking at Mercury if you've never seen it before. Good luck.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay.
Thanks, Alice.
Good night, all.